Oh, hello. My name is Mara, and welcome to Books Like Whoa. Mission Marple. It's keeping rocking. We are now on the 7th book, I believe, in Mission Marple, which is a project where I am rereading all of the Miss Marple books in their order of publication. So most of them are rereads, a couple of new reads, but this week, which is a pocketful of RYE, was definitely a reread, and I was really impressed with how well it stood up to my memory of it. So before I dive into my review, I want to tell you what Mission Marple consists of. Here's what happens on a Mission Marple video. First, I will give you a plot synopsis where we will go up roundabouts to where we find a body. In this case, we will definitely get to that point because it happens almost immediately. Then I will talk about some character details where I'm talking about like the cast of characters we're dealing with, giving you kind of a lay of the land in that respect. And then 3, I'll talk about kind of my general impressions and thematic things that I see. In this section of the video, up through there is meant to be non-spoilery. My kind of lens is I don't want to tell you anything that I think would ruin your experience of the book if you have not yet read it. So that's sort of like the lens I'm bringing. So I will start there, and then at some point I will say, hey guys, I am switching to spoilers. And at that point I will feel free to spoil anything in the Christie canon. So I will just say whatever I want to about Christie in general. Be you warned right now that that is what will happen when spoilers is up on the screen. So with all that being said, let's dive into A Pocketful of RYE. So A Pocketful of RYE was written, I think, in about 1953, and we open, the scene opens on an office in London, and pretty typical, like we got some receptionists, we got some sort of like administrative workers milling around, taking care of business, and this one gal goes in to start making the tea. She's apparently terrible at making tea, but eventually she brings it into the boss, who is Rex Fortescue. He's like super rich, and he runs this whole company. So she brings him in his tea, and then lo and behold, all of a sudden he starts sputtering, whatever, boom, dude is dead within the first like 5 pages. Or at least by the time he gets to the hospital, he's dead. They rush him there, and immediately it's pretty clear that this was murder. And at first they're like, was it the tea? It becomes a little unclear as to exactly when this poison was administered, but they do know what the poison was, which was taxine, which is from a yew tree. I can't say that I was super familiar with the fact that yew trees were poisonous, but everybody treats this like common knowledge. So hey, PSA to you, yew trees are very bad for you. You could die, like Rex Fortescue does in this book. So don't go around eating yew trees. That happens in pretty short order, and Inspector Neil comes in. Love him. He is a great detective in this book. So he comes in pretty early, and he starts meeting all of the kind of potential suspects. So we've got all these people in the office. Like I mentioned, the girl who actually brought in the tea and sort of like the head of the office lady. We also have like some lawyers and whatnot who are associated with the business, but the main focus of the novel is mostly with the family. So he goes to, I think that the like suburb they're in is called Baden Heath. Basically think of this as like super rich suburb of London. There's like 3 golf courses. It's very full of McMansions is sort of the impression you get. And in the early 50s in England, like it's impressive if you have that amount of money because things are scarce. So dude is definitely super rich. So we start meeting all of his family and like figuring out which of them, if any, may have had motive to try to do this. So we've got like the domestic staff around. There's a kind of housekeeper lady called Mary Dove, who's very efficient. She's around. There's the cook and her husband. There is a maid. There are 2 children of Rex Fortescue still living with him, or who are like in the immediate, I can't remember if they actually live with him or just live around him, but Percival is his oldest son, is sort of the heir apparent, and he is married, so his wife is around. He's got a daughter who is trying to get married to a guy he doesn't really approve of, but that guy's around too. He also has a much younger second wife who very quickly you realize is cheating on him with somebody, so that her lover is around. You've got the older aunt of his first wife who's dead. She's around. She is hilarious. I really enjoyed her as a character in this. She's very religious and judgmental, but like in kind of an amazing savage way. She's around. So you've got like a whole household going. And suffice it to say that pretty quickly it's established that all of them probably are glad he's dead, which is often the case in a Christie novel. And we also find out about an estranged son who shows up in the middle of this because his father had sent for him. His name is Lance, so he comes with his wife. So like that's all happening. And I don't want to get into exactly why Miss Marple gets involved, but let's say that things unfold in a way that catches Miss Marple's attention all the way in St. Mary Mead. She shows up and Investigator Neil has heard about her amazing skills before, so he's like down for her to help. And I know you are going to be totally surprised to find out about this, but like Miss Marple gets into the mix, figures out who done it, and serves justice like a mofo. So that is sort of an overview of the book. Let me tell you a little bit about sort of my impressions of it and some themes, and then I may do some spoilers, but I actually don't know that I have that much spoilery stuff to say to you this week. So let's dive into it. So in terms of just like my enjoyment of this, I really enjoyed this as a reread. I think my main kind of impression from this book is just that it feels very quintessentially Christie. Like there are so many little touches and details in here that are just like Christie hallmarks. I think the characterization in this is spot on. The mechanics of the mystery, I think, work pretty well. Now, she does do the thing, and if you guys watch Project Poirot, you know I got sick of this very quickly, where she has a nursery rhyme and she's like fitting the murders into the nursery rhyme. It's not too intrusive in this particular one, and I think that it pretty much works. So like, I'm gonna say that this one works okay, especially compared to something like Hickory Dickory Dock, where like the reason why that was included was there was no reason, basically. So like this one I felt like was at least relevant to the plot, so I was okay with that. And I think that just the mechanics of this worked really well. So just all around like a super solid mystery. And when I was going back and kind of like, I remembered liking this, but I really admired it this time around. And I think it reads, I was saying this last week with They Do It With Mirrors, there's something about this one that reads a lot like what I enjoy best about the Poirot canon, and why in general I think of myself as more of a Poirot person than a Marple person. This one has a lot of the things that I like in a Christie, which is it is a family in a house and there's a mystery. So, and we don't get a ton of that in Marple, though I'm realizing more than I remembered. But insofar as that is kind of the type of mystery it is, I really enjoyed this and really liked it even better than I remembered. So actually this like mixes things up. So my new ranking, I'm assuming I'm gonna have something here, but my new ranking is that I think A Murder at the Vicarage is my #1, then The 13 Problems, then I would put A Pocket Full of Rye. I liked it that much. I would put it at #3, followed by The Body in the Library, then They Do It With Mirrors, then A Murder is Announced, then The Moving Finger. So, and none of these is lower than a 3.5 stars. So I'm really enjoying this reread and really enjoyed this book. That said, this, does have one thing in it which sometimes can be just like a total deal breaker for me in a Christie, which is that Miss Marple doesn't show up until quite late in the book, I think, comparatively to some of the others. In this case, I'm okay with it because I think that when she does show up, she has a really meaningful role to play. She's not just like, oh, this needs to be a Marple book, let me throw her in. Like, she has a specific relationship to the murder. Like, she has a specific reason why she's getting involved that I found compelling. The other thing is that Inspector Neil, really enjoy him as the primary detective for most of this book. Like, I think she does a good job with him. He's not just like a total idiot. He's getting things done. He's figuring a lot of things out. So like, I think that he works pretty well, all things considered. So like, I have some patience with the fact that it's not Marple wall to wall in this book. So yeah, anyway, that would probably be the closest thing to a big ding that I have on this, but otherwise really enjoyed it. And I think a lot of that is because of the thematic content. So if you've been watching Mission Marple and Project Poirot, you'll know that one of my primary things that I'm interested in these rereads is kind of understanding Christie's development in terms of like how she talks about or thinks about morality. And I do think that there's some really interesting connections to that in this book. So there's one point where Miss Marple is kind of really specifically talking about how wicked she thinks part of this crime is. And she says to Inspector Neil, the wicked should not go unpunished. And he says, that's a very unfashionable opinion nowadays. I do think that this gets to something that is even more present in Marple than it is in Poirot, which is that I think she has a very specific sense of retributive justice. So whereas I think Poirot basically has usually a somewhat more complicated relationship to the bad guys in Poirot books, I think that Miss Marple has a much more straightforward understanding of good, bad, right, wrong than Poirot does. And I wonder if that is a reflection of the fact that Miss Marple is modeled after Christie's own grandmother, and like kind of she seems to be a pretty pure distillation of Victorian morality in a lot of ways. So there's a lot of discussion of sort of like the pure wickedness of the crimes in this book, and I thought that was really notable. I also thought it was notable that there's increasingly, I'm seeing in Marple this relationship between anger and pity. So Miss Marple often has this tremendous sense of sympathy and pity for the wronged and those who are affected by the crimes that are being discussed. Like pity is, I think, often a fair characterization of her emotional state. And that pity drives her to anger towards those who have done the bad thing. And that is often her motivating kind of factor. So there's several points where she kind of is described as having both pity and anger towards someone, and she's also described several times as an avenging fury. So in relationship to sort of this bigger theme that I've seen so far in the Mission Marple reread, where like I think a lot of the subtextual themes are female anger, it was interesting to me to see in this book, like the lens, this book kind of gave me another layer of understanding of what kind of anger, or like how I think Christie is thinking about feminine anger, that it's like often like righteous anger at injustice. I don't know. I just thought that was an interesting connection I hadn't picked up previously. And then the last thing I want to point out is a more spoilery thing. So let me leave the non-spoilery part of the review here and just say that I really like this. Like I said, I would now put this at number 3 of the 7 that I've reread so far. I just think it's a really quintessential Christie. Like if you're looking for a place to start with Christie, I would say this would be a pretty representative book of the kinds of things she does. So moving into a little bit more of a spoilery thing, one thing that does come through very strongly in Marple, I think, is classism. So whereas I think in Poirot you get to see a lot of like xenophobia kind of things, in Marple you see a lot of class related things. And the one that particularly icked me out, and again, I'm not saying that this isn't historically accurate, I'm just saying to a modern reader, it's gross. And I think that Christie herself was very deluded. Like if you read her autobiography, she talks a lot about how like the serving class is happiest when they're serving. If they can't be serving, then like they're not happy. I don't think that that was like a purely reflective thing of her time. I think that's much more a reflection of her own kind of blindness and snobbery. We all have blind spots, guys. Agatha's no different. But she specifically talks about when Miss Marple is talking about how she knew that Gladys was in on it. Some of it is because Gladys immediately told Inspector Neal, like, I didn't do it, it wasn't me. Like, that was her instinctive response. And Miss Marple says, oh, she would say that whenever she was the one who broke something when she was dusting. And then she's like, they can't help themselves. Like, they can't help but deflect blame, as if like if they were in a higher class, they would like do the right thing and be noble and take responsibility. It's like, well, or maybe they have no wages and no money, and if they say that they did it and admit it, you're gonna garnish their wages, which they can't afford not to have. Like, anyway, but I do think that we see a lot of classism in Marple. Like that's something, we definitely saw that in The Body in the Library. Like it's just an ongoing thing. It's true in Poirot as well, but I think because Poirot is somewhat of an outsider, it kind of shows up in different ways. And I think in Marple, it's much more like kind of direct. Oh, and I will also just say that sort of the hucksterism of Lance in this book reminded me a lot of Dude in Dead Man's Folly, the son who is pretending to be this other guy and then like inherit, like that kind of personality type reminded me of each other. I don't know, maybe that's a reach, but that was immediately the character who he recalled to me. But anyway, it was a great reread. I believe the next one up is 450 from Paddington, so stay tuned for that. And then we're gonna take a little break and I'll have like a mid-project check-in after that one. But I think that will do it for now. So definitely let me know what you thought of this book on your reread or your first read. You can come chat over in the forums on Goodreads. Those are spoilery discussions if you want to get more in depth with fellow people who are also doing this chronological reread. Feel free to join us over there. But yeah, besides that, I think that will do it for today. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below. I think that will do it. I hope you're having a really lovely day, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye.